You're listening to CherryPickin Entertainment.
Throw me the ball and watch what I do with it.
You are now tuned into the CherryPickin podcast with your host, Andre Cherry.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the CherryPickin podcast. I'm your host, Andre Cherry, and I appreciate you downloading this episode. I know it's been a couple weeks since the last time I recorded an episode, but I am back right now. I'm right here today recording a brand new episode for you all to listen to and enjoy to get you ready for Week 9 college football action this upcoming weekend. And it's crazy that we are already 9 weeks into the season. Can you believe that? I can't believe it. I simply cannot believe it. But to get us started, I'll recap a few of the games from Week 8 action, just give you my thoughts and analysis like I normally do before I give you my top 5 locks for Week 9 action to end this podcast. So we'll go ahead and dive right in, and we'll start with Texas versus Georgia. Prior to the matchup between Texas and Georgia, it felt like Texas was going to continue rolling on through its opponents. Georgia hasn't looked as dominating as it has in years past, so it felt like the timing was ripe for Texas to come into the SEC and shake the old order up a bit. But Georgia had other plans. The Bulldogs jumped out to a 23-0 start over the Longhorns after 2 quarters of play. Texas did come back in the third quarter and posted 15 unanswered points, but in the end, Georgia was able to clip the Horns by a score of 30-15. The story of the game is how the Georgia defense came alive against Texas as if they were waiting for this matchup all season long. Georgia posted 7 sacks, including 3 solo sacks from defender Jalen Walker, who also had 3 tackle for losses. The team overall had 10 tackle for losses, and limited the potent Longhorns ground game to only 29 yards rushing. The defense also came up with 4 turnovers, so the defense got after Texas like gangbusters on Saturday night. The SEC is really anyone's ball game right now. I know Texas A&M, I believe, is undefeated in the conference, followed by LSU, but really, there are a bunch of teams in the SEC with only 1 loss. So it really will come down to the final weeks of the season to see who is going to outlive the other ones, who's going to outlast the other SEC teams. So it's such an exciting year of college football, as you've probably heard other people say, but it truly is fun week in and week out. I mean, there are a lot of good teams in the SEC, but there's still no clear favorite. There's no one that's running away with it yet. So we'll find out in the next few weeks who is a legitimate contender for the SEC crown, but then also who's going to be representing the conference in the playoffs, because you know at least 2 SEC teams will get in. So there's a lot to still play for this season, and I'm excited to see how it will shake out. Now, with the victory Georgia had against Texas this past Saturday night, Georgia hopped up 3 spots in the AP poll to land at number 2 this week, while Texas dropped 4 spots and is at number 5. So that's still pretty good at the end of the day. There's still 2 top 5 teams in college football. So it could still, like I say, play out in anyone's favor, really. So we'll see how it shakes out. And then I have to talk about the Tennessee versus Alabama matchup. I was watching the end of this game. It was late in the fourth quarter. There was probably a minute and 30 seconds left or something around that time. And Alabama had 4th and 22. And they were out there on offense, and I was like, whoa. Like, that seems pretty questionable to do that, considering that Bama had all 3 timeouts, and then before the play even started, Tennessee went ahead and burned a timeout before the play actually started. So I figured maybe Kalen DeBoer, the head coach for Bama, was just trying to get Tennessee to burn a timeout or something, and I thought they would come back out and actually punt in that instance, but no, they went for it. It was like a screen that didn't get enough yards, and I'm just like, man, what is Alabama doing right now? They ultimately lose the game to Tennessee, and you have to think that a 2-loss Bama is probably no longer in contention for the playoffs right now, right? Like, I appreciate how Bama tries to get out these games, but you knew that they didn't have enough this year. I mean, hell, if you look at their last 5 games, they've come down to the wire. all 5 games have come down pretty much to the wire. And I still believe that Bama has enough to play for. Like, I still think it could be a good season. Certainly not great by Alabama standards. But to think they'll be in the playoffs this year seems very unlikely. And I'm not saying that there's many people that believe that they will be at this point. But crazier things have been known to happen. Just look at last season. Florida State got left out of the playoffs altogether. And you just never know how the committee is going to play it. I don't think it's likely that Bama will get into the playoffs, but anything could happen in the SEC. Everybody could have an epic collapse, all the other teams, and Bama somehow finds a way in if they can run the schedule. But I think they're going to have some trouble still ahead with the games remaining. So crazy to see Alabama kind of out of it already at this point in the season, but that's kind of how things are this year. I mean, there are a lot of very good teams. Alabama is not one of those very good teams, so hats off to Tennessee for getting the victory over Alabama this weekend. Then real quick, I just want to talk about Illinois versus Michigan. Great win for Illinois. I had U of I winning this game for my Big Ten straight-up lock for Week 8 action, and it was really cool how U of I was wearing those throwback unis with the helmets that look like those old-school leather helmets. I thought that was a really cool look. Illinois literally is the Oregon Ducks of the Midwest. If it comes to the uniforms and the helmet combos for this season, Illinois would give Oregon a run for its money this year. They've done a great job with all that. I feel like every week has been some sort of throwback uni, or at least every game at home has been a different uniform, different helmet. It's really cool. That's a fun program right now. I know a lot of people close to that university that are really enjoying this moment right now. So shout out to Illinois for getting a good victory over Michigan. But Michigan had several chances to win this game, especially when you consider that they outgained Illinois' offense and they dominated time of possession. But the main issue was that the Wolverines had 3 turnovers compared to none for Illinois. 2 of those turnovers directly led to points for Illinois on their next offensive series up. Illinois is a well-coached team. They don't make too many errors, and head coach Brett Bielema has his boys believing that they can compete and beat anyone they go up against. Now, I truly believe the Illini may end up 10-2 this season, which is remarkable if they can pull that off. I don't like their chances against the Ducks this weekend, but outside of that, they can run the rest of their schedule, and I hope they do. It would be a good story for an Illinois program that has been patient for the most part. They're probably one of the more patient fan bases in all of college football. Truly. And then before we take a quick break here, just a random tidbit. Army and Navy are still red hot and both unbeaten. That Army-Navy game is going to be wild this year, and I wish it was in Philly. I believe it's in D.C. this year where the Commanders play, but I wish it was in Philadelphia. I would be there for sure. The 2 service schools had impressive games this past weekend. Number 23 Army beat up on East Carolina by a score of 42-28, while number 25 Navy embarrassed Charlotte by a score of 51-17. Did you know that this is the first time since 1960 that these 2 schools have entered the top 25 together, and they are both unbeaten for the first time since 1945. Army will likely run its schedule until it meets up with Notre Dame in a few weeks, but who knows? They may have a chance to beat Notre Dame if they just keep it up. And Army is no slouch. Just last week, the Black Knights posted 442 total yards of offense, including 295 rushing yards. I also think Navy could run its schedule, but it does face Notre Dame this weekend. So I'm curious to see how the midshipmen perform against Notre Dame this week. If Navy's quarterback, Blake Horvath, can have a good game as a dual threat attack, I think Navy can hang with the Fighting Irish. Horvath has thrown for 888 yards this season and 10 touchdowns, while also rushing for 621 yards and 10 touchdowns. Horvath leads the team in both of those categories. So if nothing else, which take Notre Dame out of the picture, if nothing else, I think these 2 teams, Army and Navy, are setting up for an epic matchup at the end of the season during the annual Army-Navy game. And I confirm this year's matchup will be played in D.C., So I just hope these two teams can keep up their winning ways. Even if they lose a game, I don't think that takes off any of the luster of the Army-Navy game. I mean, people go out when Army-Navy, have losing records. I mean, there's so much tradition, so much pageantry with that series. I went to it a few years ago, loved it, and I just wish that I'd had a chance to see them this year, the last game of the season, in DC. That's going to be a fun game. If you're going to that game, let me know. Shout it out, because that's Army-Navy is definitely a bucket list sporting event that everyone should go to at least once. If you have the means to do so, you will not be disappointed with the Army-Navy game. I cannot wait for them to come back to Philly in like 2026. So just got a few more years to go, but that's shout out to Army-Navy. They're playing really well, and they're going to have a great season, both of those schools, respectively. Well, there we have it, my friends. We're going to take a quick timeout. That was kind of my Week 8 recap. On the other side of this break, I'll get into my top 5 locks for Week 9 action. So don't go anywhere. The Cherry Pickin' Podcast will be right back.
Are you a tackle football fan? Kick off your day with an episode of Colts Corner. A group of passionate Colts fans discuss the latest news around Indianapolis Colts football. You don't want to miss us. Follow us on Facebook, Colts Corner 1, and on Twitter at Colts_Corner 1, and all major podcast platforms.
That includes Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.
Basketball is back. And with that comes joy, tension, heartbreak, buzzer beaters, and elation. It's time to be courtside for every one of those moments, no matter where your team is playing. Short Court specializes in making replica and custom basketball courts for your home, office, sports cave to decorate your walls with all those memories. If you have a picture, we can recreate it. Featured in the 2021 UniWatch Holiday Gift Guide, short courts are made using real wood. We frame and give them an epoxy finish to protect the new centerpiece of your memorabilia collection. With previous customers including Northern Kentucky University, Southern Utah University, 199 Apparel, The Perimeter Podcast with Adam Morrison, and many more celebrating the careers and retirements of their coaches, it's time you visit shortcourts.com for more info and a gallery of our work, or you can send us an email, info@shortcourts.com. Be sure to find us on social media, just search for Short Courts. It's time to bring the home court home.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Now I'm going to unveil my top 5 locks for Week 9 action. We'll start in the ACC like I normally do, and I'm taking Miami over Florida State this week. This is a pretty easy pick for me in taking the Canes over Florida State. The unbeaten Canes are 6th in the AP poll for this week, and they have their sights set on the ACC championship game as well as a playoff berth. FSU may put up a fight since it is Miami versus Florida State after all, and there's such a storied history between these two schools, but I wouldn't expect Florida State to be in this game after the first quarter. Did you know that Miami holds the 35-33 all-time series lead, but Florida State has won the last 3 meetings? Miami has a very dynamic offense and currently scores the second most points in all of FBS with 48.3 points per game. Do you know who's number 1 in college football? Do you? Would you have guessed Indiana? Because that's the answer. Indiana scores the most points in all of college football, which is insane. Anyways, Florida State's defense has allowed an average of 31.3 points these last 3 games, and they will definitely have its work cut out for itself this weekend, as I believe Miami travels up to Tallahassee. Canes quarterback Cameron Ward has lived up to the preseason hype and is one of the favorites to win the Heisman Trophy. The 6'2 signal caller has thrown for more yards than any other quarterback in the conference at 2,538 yards and is also responsible for the most touchdowns scored in the conference right now at 27 touchdowns. Now, Miami has had some close calls these last 3 games. They did win those games, but the average margin of victory was only 4 points. So I would say that this is a potential trap game for Miami, but emotions will be high this weekend for both of these teams, Miami and Florida State. But I just don't see Miami letting off the gas at all this weekend against its rival, Florida State, its in-state hated rival, Florida State Seminoles. So, if anything, I see this more as a lopsided victory for the Canes, but we'll just have to wait and see. Out of the ACC, I'm taking Miami over Florida State. In the Big 12, I'm taking Utah over Houston. Did you know that Houston holds the all-time record against Utah at 4-0? So they're 4-0 against the Utes. That honestly surprised me, but I think after these teams meet this weekend, Utah will etch its first victory in the series. Even though I am a bit concerned about the Utes dropping their last 3 games, I do see this as an opportunity for the Utes to get back on track with a win against a Houston squad that is one of the worst teams in the conference. Houston has one more win than OK State, who is currently 0-4 in the conference, and also is the worst team in the Big 12 statistically. And who saw that coming for the Cowboys? I certainly did not see that. Not me. But anyways, back to this game with the news about a week ago that Cameron Rising has officially been ruled out for the remainder of the 2024 season. It's meant that freshman quarterback Isaac Wilson will lead the Utes the rest of the way this season. Wilson didn't have his best performance last week in the 20-12 loss to TCU, but I think he plays his best game of the season against a Houston defense that just gave up 42 points to an underachieving Kansas team last week. So if there's any game that's a good bounce back game for the Utes and a good confidence builder for the new quarterback at Utah, I think this matchup against Houston is that game. So I'm taking Utah over Houston out of the Big 12. Now out of the Big 10, I'm taking Indiana over Washington. And I don't know if there's anyone outside of Bloomington, Indiana that saw this turnaround from the Hoosiers football team this season. Indiana is currently 7-0, and what's astounding is that they haven't reached 7 wins since back at the end of the 2019 season, which seems like a lifetime ago. Head coach Curt Cignetti is doing a good job right now in his first season at the helm for IU. He's got one of the more well-balanced teams in all of college football. The Hoosiers offense posts the most points in all of FBS at 48.7 points per game. Can you believe that? They post the most points in all of college football, a team out of Bloomington, Indiana, the Indiana Hoosiers. That's crazy. It doesn't make sense to me. That does not make sense. IU boasts the 7th best scoring defense at 13.7 points per game. So again, they're very well balanced. They're a well-oiled machine. This next stretch of games does not get more real though. Maybe not the next 2 weeks, but the last few weeks, it's going to get real. It's going to get real tough, and it's going to be tough as hell against Michigan, even though Michigan is not the team that some people would have hoped they would be this year. I didn't see Michigan having much success this season. I mean, they could still have a good season, but Ohio State is still on the schedule as well for Indiana. So the Hoosiers got back-to-back games against Michigan and Ohio State. So that's going to be tough. And I haven't been able to get a good read on Washington, the Washington Huskies. Though these last 5 games, they've posted a 2-3 record, but they've also had a brutal travel schedule. They were at home against Northwestern on September 21st, which resulted in a win, but then they dropped the next game against Rutgers, which was on the road in New Jersey. Then they followed that up by a win at home against Michigan, and then they lost the next week at Iowa. So they're doing this cross-country travel schedule, which seems insane, and it seems like their travel schedule maybe has wreaked a little bit of havoc on the team. I mean, that's a tough schedule to go from Washington State all the way across the country to play a football game, then go back. So just following that pattern means that Washington will drop its game against Indiana on the road in Bloomington this upcoming weekend. The Huskies have yet to win a road Big Ten game. Will they get it this week? I doubt it. I mean, it could be a trap game for Indiana, but I just don't see Indiana letting off the gas. I think they take advantage of the Huskies this weekend, and I think Indiana will get a win out of the Big Ten for my Big Ten lock this week. So IU over Washington. Then in the Pac-12 or the Pac-2, I'm taking Washington State over San Diego State. This is the third meeting for these two schools with the series tied at 1-1. And this is the first meeting for these schools since 2011. San Diego State has won its last 2 matchups after going 0-3 the stretch of games prior. Aztecs freshman quarterback Danny O'Neal posted a season-high 254 yards in San Diego's last game against Wyoming. Washington State's defense has impressed me this season, and I believe they'll make O'Neal's day a living hell on Saturday. As a team, the Cougars have accounted for 10 sacks, 9 interceptions, and have forced 8 fumbles. On offense, Washington State is led by quarterback John Mader, who has accounted for 2,429 total yards of offense and 24 total touchdowns. So I think the Cougars win big over San Diego State this weekend out of the Pac-2. And then lastly, out of the SEC, I will take Arkansas over Mississippi State. Mississippi State has won the last 2 meetings between these 2 schools, but this year I believe the tide turns and Arkansas picks up a victory over the Bulldogs to get to 5-3. Mississippi State is on a 6-game slide right now, and its defense is giving up an average of 33.3 points per game. Last week, the Bulldogs hung in there with Texas A&M in the first half, but then came out flat in the second half and were outscored 13-7 for a final score of 34-24. I think Mississippi State will be a tough fight for Arkansas, but I believe they've got enough power at Arkansas to outpower and outlast the Bulldogs, especially when you consider Razorbacks quarterback Taylor Green is one of the better signal callers in the conference, as he's currently 4th among SEC quarterbacks for total passing yards at 1,741, and his running back Jaquindon Jackson is 4th among all SEC rushers with 592 rushing yards. This dynamic duo on offense will most certainly help carry Arkansas to a victory this week over Mississippi State. So out of the SEC, I'm taking Arkansas over Mississippi State. So those are my top 5 straight up locks for Week 9 action. I'll run that list down for you one more time. Out of the ACC, I'm taking Miami over Florida State. Out of the Big 12, I'm taking Utah over Houston. Out of the Big 10, I'm taking Indiana over Washington. Out of the Pac-2, I'm taking Washington State over San Diego State. And out of the SEC, I'm taking Arkansas over Mississippi State. Well, there we have it, my friends. That was my Week 9 preview podcast episode from the CherryPickin podcast. I hope you learned a little bit. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you have fun watching college football this week. Hope you have a great week ahead here. I hope everything goes well. I hope you stay safe. You have fun. You do what you need to do this week. You handle your business so that come Saturday, you can just relax all Saturday long on the couch, or maybe at the local pub or bar, or maybe you're going to a game in person this weekend. I hope you have a great time wherever you may be, and I hope you watch all the games you can on Saturday. It's going to be an amazing Saturday. Week 9 action is coming right at you this week. Thank you for downloading this podcast episode. Hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you in the near future. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Peace. Illinois literally is the Oregon Ducks of the Midwest. Thank you again for tuning into my CherryPickin podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe to my show and drop me a rating on Apple Podcasts. All of my digital content can be found at the website CherryPickinSports.com. And if you are looking to interact with me via social media, my Twitter handle is @Cherry_Pickin. That's PICKIN. On my Twitter, you'll also find a link to my blog where I post my weekly college football predictions and analysis. I can also be reached via email at cherrypickinsports@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out to me regarding what you like about this podcast or about what content you'd like to hear more of on future episodes. I sincerely thank you for your support, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Take care.